Priya,
Hello, thank you for this practice. Um,
my pleasure. How did you do?
so it was good. Yeah, it was nice.
Good.
My question
Hmm.
is about the sword. Firstly, thank you so much for the Q&As. I was listening to a session yesterday, and I felt like most of the questions that are asked, sometimes I have similar questions, but not the
Sure.
right
Yeah,
word.
yeah, yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, it felt like attending a class. Pre-
Right.
So thank you for that. With the sword, you were discussing something, obviously body awareness was a part of it, and you'd given a really nice explanation around it, why, and how much it can help putting the awareness on the body and body expansion, which I'm really trying to work on.
Mhm.
Um,
I mean, to take it like I can't remember what I said that last time, but to take it even a little bit further, like we talk about, it could be any sort of psychological thing, but like if we look at the balancing of the nervous system, the fight flight versus rest and repair, fight flight is more than just fight flight. It's the part of the nervous system that's about action and doing things. And so it's fight, flight, freeze, and then there's a thing called fawn, you know. And so these are different aspects of that mechanism. And they're really, when we think of trauma, we think of it being in the emotional body and the mental body, but a lot of it's in the nervous system. Like it's in the body, it's in the tissues, and it's in the nervous system. And if it's been there long enough, there starts to be an imbalance between that fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or just really action and activity and our ability to repair ourselves. And so the rest, repair, digest, and the the thing about putting your awareness on your body, it helps with expansion and it helps with we do that even with the oils. We do it with the sword. We do it with some of the mystical practices or the inner practices with some of the tools. But even with the oils, we do something like that. And part of what you're doing is, you know, even with Astara Lama Yoga, you do the breathing where you inhale up, exhale down, and then you be still, be aware, and your awareness is on the body. And what you're doing is it's helping the nervous system to shift or to change. It's based on the idea of neuroplasticity. And so by having your awareness on the body, you know, be it that an old feeling comes up, a trauma comes up, you're working on like being triggered in the event, and your brain and your nervous system creates these like loops, right? They keep creating these loops. And so the longer they've been there, the stronger these loops get. Like, you like when you think of the idea of being triggered, you get triggered and then you engage this loop. Like, and you just like you don't really choose these responses, you just start having these responses over and over again, right? You kind of do the same kind of response that you did before. And so the idea of putting your awareness on your body and just observing it starts to shift the body out of held trauma in the nervous system, and it breaks down those loops. And so that's the whole premise of Lama Yoga and sustained awareness and putting your awareness on the body and the use of the sword or the purba or the dorje where you're, putting your awareness on the body or the oils when I go, okay, now where do you feel it in your body? Think of a person, now feel it in your body. Instead of waiting for the situation to trigger you, you go, ah, I'm going to think of that person who's a jerk, and then I'm going to feel it in my body. And what you're doing is, for one, you're balancing the nervous system. You're helping the brain and the nervous system to change, and you're breaking it out of uh, those loops. And so you can do it a lot of different ways, but basically you're helping to break out of that fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And fawn just means like overcompensating, self-abandonment, just kind of letting go of yourself and just, being too like, let me even look it up. I have it written down somewhere. I have like 3 or 4 things written about that. Give me just a sec. Trauma loops right here. Yeah, people pleasing, self-abandonment, and over accommodation is fawn. And so you know there's different ways to go through and break it, but one of the best ways is by like listening to the body, and like even the idea of working with like sound healing. A lot of times with sound healing, people are just doing the sound and they're listening, and it's relaxing to the body, and it kind of helps shift the nervous system. But to really do sound healing well is before you even do sound, you start paying attention to the body and you kind of feel deeper into the body. And you'll notice that, a good piece of you will feel very relaxed, but especially the closer you get into like where the bones are, like, like deeper in the body, there's like a little low grade agitation, and like you just kind of sit and you feel that kind of agitation, and just that will start expansion and relaxing it. But the idea of like deeper like Buddhist practices where they work with a bell or a bowl or a gong or something like that is you really tap into being aware of the body, and then as you kind of sit and you're aware, and we do this with oils too, as you sit and are aware and you start to tap into that, then you use the oil or the sound to to like shift that part of the nervous system and break out of these deeper loops. And so, any variation of that, it doesn't always have to be the same, because the idea you're trying to break out of a loop. And so that's why a lot of times when I teach some of these things, I don't go, do this, do it this way, like for 45 minutes, 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Like I don't want to create another loop, right? Your body will make them at some point, but we want them to be organic. You want, even the idea of like Lama Yoga is your body's going to create the loops, right? It's kind of what I call intellect and homeostasis. But what starts to happen as you start to have greater experiences that are not about trauma, not about your lower nature, and not about fight flight, and not about like the freeze or the fawning or any of that. And you start to have these other experiences, and then you're listening to your body. You're shifting your nervous system in a way that your body like experiences that and integrates it, and then at some point it starts to go, let's make a loop out of this, right? It's going to make a loop at some point, but it's like you're getting to choose what the loops are, where when we're coming from trauma or from just the crap that have happened to us in the past, your loops are just you, you know it, like, because when I say trauma, like I mean, we could just talk about that word for like a while. And most times people think of the event that happened, but really, like trauma in the nervous system isn't about the event, it's what you had to do to get through it. Like that's the best way to say it is what did the body have to do to get through that trauma or to get through those micro traumas or to get through that series of traumas. And yes, there was things that were traumatic, but the body had to cope and manage and get through these situations for, for survival and to be able to thrive. And at some point, these loops got created that then over a period of time, you have a hard time breaking out of those loops. And we all got them. It's just that some of us have had more difficult things like, when we were young or when we were at work or, you had a jerk that was a boss or, whatever it was. We all got them, but, the more that we are able to refine and create these like kind of higher loops, that when we start to re-experience some of these things, that would have triggered us, so many years ago or even 6 months ago, your reactions keep becoming more and more different. Like, oh, I would have been upset or I would have cried or I would have gotten angry or I would have ran away or I would have avoided or, and now you're just like, you know, maybe there was a little bit of an annoyance, but you know,
Yeah. Thank you for that explanation, actually.
yeah,
And that's why I like revisiting um, these these discussions also because I feel like sometimes it's not easy to take everything in the one discussions.
yeah.
And
Oh, like even this idea, like, we could probably spend a day talking about it. Like a whole Saturday or something where we just chatted about it. But like doing that, because in the early days, I did think about doing that, but it becomes too hypothetical. And then we start getting too wound up in the details and the pieces of information and the best thing to do is to practice it and talk about it after the fact because then you have direct experience and now you can like really personalize it and you have a reference and you know what it means and because I was just talking about this with another therapist today and back in the early days I would train different practitioners and we'd have these with the patient we'd have these amazing sessions that the person had like some big breakthrough or we made some big progress or something and we'd make notes and do whatever and I was like I'd always follow it up with but how did we fall short because it's never completely perfect if you look at it from the point of view of intuition there's a movement, but there's still going to be more movement. So the more movement is the next obstacle or the next piece or the next thing that arises or the thing that still got left untouched. And, everything in our lives is a process, but from the point of view of the intellect, we think about it as a thing. And we're like, yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to release this, and then it's all going to be perfect, and I get to just do whatever. That's not accurate, and the idea of symptom-oriented treatments really kind of reinforces that. Where if you look at what healing is a process, and spirituality is a process. Emotions are a process, and if you're doing thoughts properly, it's a process because again I was just having this conversation with somebody and y- you know the point that I was making, they were asking about like how to deal with something. And it's like, it's not, it's not the pieces of information that have been gathered up. It's not the facts. It's how you think about the situation. That's the issue. That's always the issue. It's not like, well, they did this and they did that, and I did this and I did that. That's fine, but it's still about how you think about it. And if you think of karma, you know, if you think of karma, I would say karma is so incredibly misunderstood. It is so misunderstood. One of the quickest ways of diminishing karma is to learn the lesson, right? To learn the lesson. So, that's most spiritual teachers say some version of that, right? So then we take it and we personalize it and we go, oh, this situation, this person did this. I'm having difficulty with that. I need to learn the lesson here. I need to learn the lesson there. It's Those aren't the lessons. Like, we get a piece of information, and this is why intellect is so difficult. We assume, like, okay, I know these pieces of information. This is what it is. The lessons have very little or nothing to do with the incidents themselves. It really doesn't. The lessons are about different ways of thinking. Like, yeah, things happen, but how do we think about them? The lesson is about, how do I think about things? How do I think about fear? How do I think about trauma? How do I think about when people are being aggressive to me or psychic attack? How do I think about stress? How do I think about having an open heart? It's not just about stimulating the heart. It's a stream of consciousness, that there's different kinds of consciousness that we need to learn how to do. And when you say learn, it is a process. It's the intuitive process. But the intellect gets so stuck on things, like on the reasons or the ideas or the things we need to do, or to make sense out of what happened, and like, what do I need to do to erase this? And
Yeah.
it's not about those details. It really isn't. It's about how to think. It's like, how do you think when you're in a bad neighborhood? How do you think when you're in a good neighborhood? You know what I mean? Like, you still gotta survive. Just because you're in a bad neighborhood, you don't pick up a gun and start robbing liquor stores. You behave a particular way, even though there might be a lot of threats being directed at you. And then you get into a different situation. How do I think in this situation? Do I demonize other people? Do I blame other people? Do I get aggressive to other people? And it's that idea, like, if you really boil it down, I've said this before, is to not become a monster, to do, to deal with the monster. Like, you don't want to get pulled into these lower ways of thinking or other people's loops and become something that you're really not. But the gravity of the situations can really pull you in. And so, how do we think in these situations when they arise? It's not about the facts. It's not about what happened. It's more of, even if it happened, how do we shake it off and not lose ourselves in that situation? That is actually the lesson, is the movement, the flow, like, that you can be in a difficult situation and not become the monster, or not, be whatever, that you are still staying aligned with your nature, your higher nature.
I feel like it's difficult to be aligned when your nervous system gets so quickly out of sync.
Yeah, 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 I agree. It is hard. I mean, that's part of the thing is tempering the nervous system, healing the nervous system so that these things happen. But remember what you said the other day is like, I don't even know what's happening. Something's happening, like it was good, but like something's happening and I don't understand. That you getting the way to think. Like it's arising in you. Like you're
So
getting there. Yeah. It's just
yesterday,
it's a lot of little movements. For everybody, even the Dalai Lama, a lot of little movements. It's not like he's like, I'm the Dalai Lama, I have arrived. You know, look at the things he has to deal with. He has to deal with what happened to his country and his people and, all these things. He takes on an even bigger role, but just because he's the being that he is, doesn't mean that he's just like, it's all dialed in, I'm good. It's still this process. Even the supreme God is still evolving.
so this is gonna never end.
I think there comes a place to where, uh, when you're just essence, it's very different than when you're in a form.
Well, right
It
now it
still
feels
it still happens, but the thing that being in a form does is it makes the essence refine much faster. And so it's an accelerated path. Yeah.